DC's Infinite Frontier Green Lantern number 2 released yesterday with a rather compelling story that only pushes us even further forward. Here we start with an amazing artwork of all of the notorious Lanterns burying a Guardian, the Guardian who died in the last chapter, from the unfortunate series of terroristic attacks from the magic race of beings who was here at the Galactic Senate for DC. And John Stewart is essentially relaying all this information to everybody who couldn't directly be on Oa for that galactic meeting, like all the Green Lanterns who are out in the verse, essentially keeping them up to date with what's been happening. Because keep in mind, all of this is super important to them. This is like the more political side of things. What happens at this event will essentially establish, what's the future of the Lanterns will be, the Green Lanterns specifically. And that being said, he's saying, hey, we were hit on two separate fronts. We had a Guardian die, unfortunately. And you can just see on John's face the frustration and grief because he feels it's totally his fault that this happened. It happened underneath his watch. He was there. But as he moves past that, he thinks, we're still trying to deal with some of these terrorists that are out there. And we actually transition back over to the rest of the GL Corps that's trying to still fight this magic dragon that guy was riding who killed that Guardian. It's wiling out on the surface, and it's taken Yellow Lanterns, Green Lanterns, Red Lanterns, man, a little bit of everybody to try and deal with this thing. Because apparently the magical hide it has is so dense, their constructs, their rings can't get through it. Kelly Quintella kind of jumps up. She's trying to do things, but she's just trying to get in the way of the big leagues. Like Guy shows up and literally tells her, like, hey, get out of here. You're not helping whatsoever. And he notices that using other things to attack it actually manages to work against it versus the constructs that they're using. The ring energy doesn't seem to be working against whatever this magic is that they're utilizing. And so he yells at Kilowog, and they begin to wrap the dragon up with all sorts of random things around, and they manage to solve the problem, much to the awe of Kelly Quintella as she gets dragged away by a Thanagarian, who's been just, nothing but trash talk this whole time. And John continues his briefing to all the different lanterns, and it's just getting worse when it comes to this whole United Planets thing, because the more and more they talk about it, the more and more it seems like things aren't going in their favor. And that's essentially what John says is, man, the Guardians are still discussing what the plans are. But, until then, just keep doing your thing, keep locked down, but dress for a funeral because we're going to bury a Guardian. And thus we cut away to the Guardian's funeral, where one of the Guardians of the universe is essentially giving the eulogy for their fallen brother. And we get some really interesting, Guardian, just scaling, just thrown in here. They're literally beings of energy. Their physical forms are simply representations to make lesser beings feel safe. That's pretty wild. But the Guardians don't really look at death the same way we do, which is kind of interesting to see how they perceive that stuff. But essentially, they managed to push on their fallen brother. They put him inside the central power battery and let him move on in their way of belief. However, they address the entire GL Corps about the things that have been happening recently. And you have all the human lanterns with Kilowog sitting up top that are, the top dogs. But keep in mind, Hal and Kyle are not here. They're just construct communications right now. The Guardians essentially say that, hey, look, things are changing, and we're going to essentially tell you how it's going to work. And so they say that 1,200 sectors will be vacated of their jurisdiction, and they will be ceded to the new United Galactic Government. All previous corps hierarchy will be erased, replaced with the new mission objectives and designations. All lanterns without sectors will be reassigned. And somebody asks, hey, wait a minute. I haven't heard anything about this. And they're like, oh, when does that happen? And the Guardians say, we were unclear. It's now. And all of the Green Lantern rings from everyone begins going off. Sector 3003, defunct. Lantern Nort, guest. Sector 0279, defunct. Lantern Alvix, outrider. Lantern Cruz, Lantern Baz. Everybody was being pinged with a certain objective. But there were key terms after their names were listed. It says modified duty parameters will download into your rings. 2,400 sectors remain. There is no honor guard, no nothing. You are all equals now. One core. And as the people in the crowd begin to talk, all the Green Lanterns begin to wonder what the kind of twisted future is there for them. Some are confused, some are upset, and Guy's the first one among them, angry that he would get stuck into being whatever an outrider would be. Hal was worried about this as well, saying if he needs a wingman, and John says, no, I got this, I'll talk to the Guardians. So he rolls up on the Guardians later. And he says, yo, what's going on? You just dropped this on us during the eulogy of a dead Guardian? He says, you didn't give any of us time. You just dropped this on us like a nuke, man. And they're like, well, what do you really expect of us, dude? Like, the Guardians are so, they're so, like, inhuman. They're so cold and non-emotional. They're just like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it was decided. We weren't going to change our mind, so whatever. And John's like, well, what if everyone rejects this? What if everybody just says no? These people have given up everything for a service to the Corps. There's no pay associated with being a Corps member or anything. And they say, well, like, then those rings will find replacements. So be it. And John's like, you erased us, and now you're going to make us, what, bodyguards, henchmen for some sort of galactic government? Which is kind of ironic, considering I think that's essentially what you call them for the Guardians. But he says, but on top of that, you're throwing the best lanterns, the most powerful lanterns, to random planets across the galaxy? And they say, oh, well, Hal's on Earth, so don't worry about Earth. And he says, no, but they're the most powerful ones. Why would you send them out wherever? And they say, no, you need to understand. We sent them to the most important worlds. And he says, well, why are they so important all of a sudden? Why are these specific worlds so important? And they basically tell him, have you ever wondered why there's so many Green Lanterns that come from Earth? Or why we chose Oa as our home, considering Maltus was our original planet? Or why Mogo is still alive despite being a sentient world? It turns out they are connected. They are actually 7 crux worlds that happen to spur growth and evolution that preserve life throughout the cosmos. Earth is the crux of heroes. And it turns out that when the current pantheon of the new gods die, our Earth will ascend to become the new 5th world. However, John looks at all the worlds they're showing him and says, wait, there's only 5. What do you mean? And they say, well, I'm sure you're aware of the others. John says, what do you mean by that? And they say, well, Krypton was one, and it met its unfortunate demise. They were brilliant scientific minds. And the others is your failure, actually. Xanshi. And if you don't know, John was a pretty hot-headed guy until a moment where he essentially got a planet blown up for his arrogance, and that planet was Xanshi. And it's something that greatly affected his character. John says, yeah, I'm aware of Xanshi, unfortunately. And they say, yeah, we know, we're aware of your grief involved with such things. Earth basically became the protectors that we needed as a result of even losing those worlds. And your fellow Lanterns are the ones who are holding up that mantle. And he says, well, what's my place in all of this? Everyone else got reassigned, but I didn't. And they say, well, look, dude, your duty's elsewhere. Like, there's this new shit going on called the Dark Sectors. They're regions that are within our reality, but we cannot see into them, which is weird because these guys pretty much look through the universe casually. Even their sight is being blinded by threads of hypertime that are being erupted from the bleed, what they call like underspace cyclones. And so like time cyclones essentially, or like reality cyclones. I'm not even really sure. But these barriers, they essentially want John to investigate whatever's going on with these dark sectors because it doesn't seem natural. It seems fake, as if somebody's doing them intentionally, and they're popping up. So John says, well, okay, like, there's no way I can do this alone. Like, dude, you're talking about sectors of space that are bigger than galaxies. He says, for me to go in there and, like, help anybody who needs it or anything, he says, how am I possibly supposed to do that? And they say, oh, you're not going alone. They're sending half of the Green Lantern Corps with them. 1,000 lanterns to support him in this endeavor. And all of them fly up into the sky and begin focusing all of their lantern rings, all of their energies on one focal point. And John asks, well, what are they doing? What could possibly they all be trying to create right now? And one of the Guardians says, well, it's impossible for any one lander to actually breach the dark sector. It's too powerful for like average people to even mess with. So even 100 lanterns wouldn't be able to do it. So you're going to need 1,000 lanterns and then create a giant spacefaring vessel. That's going to be their way of getting into the dark sector. And John Stewart says, dang, dude, 1,000 Green Lanterns? And they say, well, it could be 1,001 if you accept your mission. John looks back, and of course he says, I'm in. And his ring pops up, Quest Leader, John Stewart. We then transition to a different point in time that's labeled 1 hour ago on Oa. And we see John Stewart, Kelly Quintella, and Simon Baz all walking away from the central power battery. And essentially Kelly's super mad that she got dragged all the way out here just to go hang out with a bunch of, blue Smurfs, the Guardians. And she doesn't even get to go on the super space journey that John's about to go on. So she's a little bit salty about it. But she says, hey, don't worry about it. I've got you here with Simon. He can be a little hot-headed, so, keep an eye on him. But I've got to do this. This is kind of just where things are going. And I do apologize, about that. We don't really have a choice here. But that being said, he's going to take care of you. Don't worry. He's going to take you to the Guardians, and they're going to check out your gauntlet. You're going to be golden. And they're not going to take it off, so don't worry. But you do need to work with them and try and be, what an actual Green Lantern is. She says, I am Green Lantern. She says, no, you're not a Green Lantern. You're willful as shit, but you're not quite a Green Lantern yet, kid. And he says, well, hey, take care. I'm off. See you on the other side. And he flies up to that giant Green Lantern construct ship and begins to take off. And as they take off, Simon and Kelly just kind of wander around hanging out with this giant floating octopus thing that Kelly has befriended since she's been on the planet. She was the one bragging about her fight with Gemerald a while back. And she says, yeah, let's go get something to eat. And Kelly says, yeah, I'm down for that. But, yo, Simon, what's wrong with the battery? And he says, there's nothing wrong with the battery. Boom! Everyone is blinded as the central power battery detonates, throwing them all back, incinerating all of the civilians nearby. Kelly is thrown back. Entire buildings are evaporated. Green Lanterns are destroyed down to the bone. And we cut away, someone watching, sitting on what looks like Metron's chair of knowledge, saying, yes, die quickly, Oa. Mercy is something you didn't deserve. And the whole universe watches as the Green Lanterns fall. We then transition to Oa now. An unknown Green Lantern still seems to be functioning and is flying towards Oa. The Lantern flies past 2 separate cruisers, one Thanagarian and one Coluan, but the Lantern doesn't care about Thanagarians or Coluans right now. They needed to figure out what was going on, what happened. So they decide to hail the planet, the Guardians, to see what's going on. No response. As they arrive on the planet, it seems that there are no Green Lanterns in range of all of Oa. Seems there's injuries everywhere, very few survivors, but low radiation levels for some reason. She says, wait a minute, I see something, some sort of green barrier somewhere. She asks, you said there were no Green Lanterns on this planet. And the ring says, no, there's not. As the green barrier finally manages to drop, you hear ramblings of Spanish from the inside as Kelly Quintella slowly lets down her barrier. Her glove wasn't considered a Green Lantern. However, she has her friends, both Simon and that tentacle-like creature, chilling with her. However, Simon's hand has almost been blown off. It's completely incinerated as she cries, trying to figure out how to help them. She looks up to find Jo Mullein, the last lantern remaining, with her ring telling her there are no Green Lanterns here. An interesting story to say the least. Green Lantern issue number 2 for the Infinite Frontier has some pretty wild stuff in it. We're seeing a weird convergence away from the ideas of Future State inside this, because Kelly was supposed to be on Mogo going into one of those dark sectors, not John. It could explain, like, John could still be going into those dark sectors. Like, that could be where they wound up. But the Kundians are something that are already within DC, so why would he have to go into the dark sectors to be fighting something like the Kundians, which were the foes he fought in Future State? We're starting to see that maybe that was indeed a potential future of what happened, and aspects of it are still true. For example, the battery getting destroyed, but the storylines for who goes where may be different now. So it's a little bit unclear, and I'm curious to see what exactly comes as a result of it. There was some really cool random scaling things in here, like humans going to, or Earth being the new fifth world beyond like the fourth world that exists as the new gods. That was pretty wild, which means DC humans will scale beyond new gods. So that's some pretty awesome stuff. And I'm really, really curious to see exactly how this Star Trek-esque Jon Stewart adventure goes into the Dark Sectors, because I was a really big fan of how they utilized the Dark Sectors in Future State. I was really hoping they would follow back up on that. So I'm glad that's becoming relevant. I wonder what exactly exists out there in those Dark Sectors. What were those dark beings? Were they just primal beings who existed out in the dark, or is there something else at play within those Dark Sectors? And with Darkseid running around causing problems in the Infinite Frontier and killing Ganthet, there's going to be a lot less help for the Lanterns than there ever was. But until next time, guys, it's been great. Later, Lanterns.